Hey, welcome back to Everyday Jesus. I'm Derek. So today I wanted to jump in to the greatest commandment, as we're going to talk a lot about the commandments of Jesus. I want to start with the biggest one, the greatest one. In the book of Matthew, there's a story of where some of the religious leaders of the day were talking to Jesus and testing him, asking him questions, and they ask him, what's the greatest commandment? And he says, love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your mind, with all of your soul, and with all of your strength. And the second commandment is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. And he says all the law that the Jews at that time followed, and all the prophets that were speaking to the people, all of these rest on these two. Rest on these two things, loving God with everything that we have, and with loving our neighbor. And one of the things to remember is that Jesus commands according to his character. He doesn't give us arbitrary commands. So if he is commanding us to love him, what does that say about his character? What does that say about the character of God? If he commands us, the greatest commandment, the greatest two commandments are to love him and our neighbors, don't you think he loves us? It's easy to get tripped up in religiosity, we would say, or just following rules and commandments. And there a lot of times, I remember, in my life, there have been times where I've really doubted Christianity or other beliefs, and because of it just seemed arbitrary. It seemed like, well, why does it matter if I do this or if I do that? And so it's easy to kind of reject Jesus because we think that he's commanding us to do all these things that don't bring joy and that don't bring life and that just seem arbitrary and seem just kind of silly sometimes. But when we as we look through the commandments of Jesus, if we can keep in the back of our minds this main command, the main command is to love the Lord your God, to love our neighbors. And if everything else hangs on those two things, I think that there's so much more in them. So we're gonna walk through a lot of the commandments of Jesus, but as we do, what we're going to find is him and his character. The first one, the natural question, if I'm commanded to love God, well, maybe you don't even believe in God. Maybe you don't know who he is. Maybe you don't. Maybe that seems weird. How can I love God if I don't know him? Well, as we look through his commandments, the way to know him is to see his character and learn who he is through what he commands. Again, these aren't arbitrary things. These aren't just a list of rules that if we jump through these hoops, he'll accept us. What he's calling us to is to obey and love him through obeying his commandments, because he commands according to his character. And the more that we live out his commandments, the more that we see his good, beautiful, perfect character and his good, beautiful, perfect love. And sometimes we have to start with just, I don't know, but I'll obey these things. I'll start trying to walk this out. I'll ask for strength and courage to walk some of these things out. And the more that we do, the more that we see his character, the more we fall in love with his character and who he is. The more we're able to obey that first commandment. In my life, when I finally stopped just trying to obey a bunch of rules and be good and be moral and be pure and holy, when I stopped trying to do that and started actually trying to obey the character and the commands of Jesus, I found that I actually started to just really love him when I started to see who he is through what he commands, not just as arbitrary things, but as life-giving commands, life-giving laws, you could say. But it's so much more than that. It's like we talked about earlier. It's life-giving food for my spirit and my soul, and that has just changed my life and my heart as I've started to see who he is, started to just legitimately fall in love with who he is. And that has helped me obey that second commandment, to love my neighbor as myself. There's a fire that can grow when we follow Jesus, when we fall in love with who he is, and then begin to just, in a sense, naturally live that out. It's such an exciting thing when you see that begin to take shape in your life, when you see him begin to work in you as a response to your response to following him and to obeying him. Even if at first, without understanding, just saying, I believe that there's life here, and so I'm going to follow even before I understand. And as you do that, you'll see and you'll understand and you'll love him, and that will drive you to love your neighbor and all those around you. So those are the first two commandments. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. Even before you know who he is, begin with wanting to love, asking, seeking to love. You know you want love. You know love is a good thing. And I encourage you that the author of love will show you how to do it and will draw you into it as we seek and see and learn who he is and why we would even come to love him. And that second great commandment of loving our neighbors is a beautiful thing. So much of what he commands later is revolving around that. How do we love our neighbors? What do we do? What does that look like? We toss around the word love a lot in our society, and so much it's kind of an empty word, right? We all know that. But from the author of love can come true love in ways that we may never see, we will never see outside of him. So continue to join with me as we seek and dig deeper into loving this God, whose character we will see more clearly and more fully as we pursue him and as we obey him. Jesus says at one point, if you love me, you will obey me. That is not a dry rote thing. That is not a thing that we do just out of just gritting our teeth and obeying. This is a feedback. This is a self-fulfilling thing. As we love him, we'll obey him. And as we obey him, we will love him. But we can't have one without the other. So I encourage you to think on that today. If you follow Jesus, ask him, help me love you more. Help me to see your character through your commands more today. And if you don't follow Jesus, man, I encourage you, just ask God to show himself to you. Show him why we should love him. You can be honest. Say, I don't know you. I don't love you because I don't know you. But I'm open to hearing. I'm open to seeing. And I want to see. I want to know who you are. And I want to love you. Even if you don't necessarily want to love him. Sometimes we start with, I want to want it, right? So I encourage you, be honest with God. He can take it. So be honest with him today, wherever you are, whether you are a Christian and don't really feel love for Jesus. Be honest with that today and lay down everything for him and press in to seeking him, seeing his character, and falling more in love with him in obedience to the first two and greatest two commandments. Bless you today. We'll see you tomorrow.